The following video is sponsored by Ubisoft. Immortals Fenyx Rising is a release from Ubisoft Quebec that puts you on an epic quest to restore the Greek gods of Olympus to their former glory and save the world. Along the way, you'll encounter a bevy of mythological beasts and heroes, like Achilles, Medusa, the Cyclops, and Odysseus, as you traverse a giant map covered in puzzles, vaults, and mysteries. When Immortals Fenyx Rising releases for Stadia, Xbox, PlayStation, Switch, and PC on December 3rd, you'll be encountering a deep Grecian mythology that many are only vaguely aware of. So Ubisoft asked me to make a video that explores the gods and myths in Immortals Fenyx Rising. Most depictions of the Greek pantheon and its surrounding mythology either make them out to be malevolent villains or disinterested bystanders. I mean, you've seen them 100 times in media, and their depictions always boil down to the usual stereotypical tropes and humdrum characters served reheated from the microwave. But here, there's a human element that's unmistakable. Immortals Fenyx Rising somehow walks a line that simultaneously doesn't require you to have ever heard of a Greek myth, yet finds a way to reward those with prior knowledge of the source material. But we're getting ahead of ourselves here. There are differences between the myths as I present them here and the commentary in-game, but the ancient Greeks had multiple versions of the stories as well, so that's hardly surprising. The very first thing you learn when the game starts is that Typhon, huge monster and misguided baddie, has broken free of the chains that hold him in Tartarus and is seeking revenge on Zeus and all of his kin, which is a lot to unpack in an opening monologue. Typhon was a monster that rose up against the upstart god Zeus for control of the cosmos, and was beaten by a combination of serious beard action and an abundance of lightning bolts. Thoroughly bludgeoned, Typhon was then shackled beneath Mount Etna and kept imprisoned in Tartarus, which is a dungeon of torment and suffering akin to the Judeo-Christian concept of hell. But in the words of Diana Ross and the Supremes, now he's back, and Typhon intends to eliminate the Greek gods and reshape the world as he sees fit, pointing out that the existing gods are petty, cruel, vainglorious, and generally rubbish, which is all true actually, as Zeus could have just zapped Typhon to death, but, instead chose to torture him forever. Which brings us to Prometheus. Having already wiped out all the lesser gods, Typhon now has his sights set on the Big Z himself, so the king of all gods has been forced to turn to an unlikely person for help. Prometheus first appears in-game strapped to a mountainside, stripped to his skivvies, and generally not too happy with his lot in life. Best known as the Titan who saw the humans shivering on Earth and felt bad for them, so he stole the secret of fire from Zeus and gave it to us to survive. When Zeus found out, he overreacted in typical fashion.
You chained me to this rock and fed my liver to an eagle out of love.
An especially cruelly ironic torture, as the Greeks believed that the liver was where human emotions were stored, which means, surprise, Prometheus wasn't especially pleased to see Zeus in-game. But as Prometheus has the gift of foresight and prophecy, literally that's what his name means in ancient Greek, Zeus needed Prometheus to see if there was a way out of this mess, which is where you come in, designing a hero aptly named Fenyx to rise from the ashes of the world to fight back using godlike powers and a full panoply of weapons and armor. What then unfolds is one of the most creative narrative framing devices I've ever encountered in a video game, where the old storyteller Prometheus, desperate for conversation after being stuck alone for so many years, begins a rambling recount of his prophecy to try and stall Zeus's departure so he can keep somebody around longer. All the while, the big beardo himself interrupts and interjects like a spoiled child. It reminds me of how the ancient Greeks themselves likely passed on these stories, with wizened individuals spinning a yarn for young listeners, having to fight off boredom and derailments with frequent action scenes and a healthy dose of humor. If you've ever seen Jim Henson's Storyteller series of Greek myths, Prometheus draws on that same tradition. Zeus himself is presented here as a booming blunderbuss of a man.
Wait, that was just the prologue? How does it take someone that long to begin a story? Odysseus made it home faster.
Sure, when he was young, he was a brash upstart who killed his own father and single-handedly claimed Olympus, but that was a long time ago. Now, this party animal ruler has spent eons enjoying the perks of being king, and frankly, he's indulged a bit too heavily in life's pleasures and has let his guard and waistline go down a little bit. He comes across as the ex-jock sports star who was big back in his day, but is not retired gracefully, with an almost comically over-the-top masculinity that is desperate to still be seen as virile. It's such a perfect encapsulation of all that is Zeus. The original myths paint the gods as flawed, supersized humans, and in-game you can hear these old-timers swapping stories of how great they were back in the day.
Oh yes, remind me to erase my own faults with narration. Zeus, truly a good person, murdered his first wife by getting her to turn into a fly and then ate her.
Wait, that's what happened to Metis? I thought she was visiting her sister in Babylon. Oops.
And he's just one of a whole pantheon on offer. Early on in game, you'll encounter a slight, spry youth with quick hands and sticky fingers. Hermes is a fast-talking, light-hearted messenger of the gods with a tendency to kleptomania and mischief. As the game reminds us, he's also the god of commerce, profit, and thieves, which actually makes a lot of sense when you stop to think about it. And his personality here reveals the same character design as the Flash and Quicksilver from the X-Men movies, both of which Hermes inspired. Quick on his feet and guarded with his thoughts, he's the only god besides Zeus who hasn't been captured. There's a deep understanding of Greek myth on display, as the mythic characters here are, initially anyway, the antithesis of their normal selves, with Typhon having broken off the essence of each god when he's captured him, leaving them a husk of their former godliness, making it your main job in game to restore them to then go and fight Typhon. Aphrodite is the goddess of love and beauty. She's usually vain and a bit catty, but here Typhon has stolen her narcissism. So the first time you encounter her, she's basically a parody of the giving tree, transformed into a rather shapely apple tree. Instead of whiling her ways a day in front of a mirror, she selflessly offers woodland critters and birds her perfect fruits, which is a savvy reference to Aphrodite's desire to obtain a golden apple, which was one of the mythological causes for the Trojan War, where she seduced Paris of Troy to win a divine beauty competition. Paris was then allowed to woo Helen, dooming thousands to their deaths, all so Aphrodite could be recognized as the most beautiful goddess. Even the quest to restore her harkens back to her creation myth, as you're tasked with finding a giant pearl and rolling it into the sea to create foam, replicating the situation of her birth in myth. The game is even savvy enough to make a reference to the alternate version of the myth, where the pearl is a lopped-off testicle of Uranus, and the foam is a very different viscous white liquid entirely.
I can't take this anymore. Zeus, Gaia lied to you about how Aphrodite was born.
Athena, goddess of strategy, artisans, and wisdom, is renowned for her stalwart advice and practical insight and restraint, except for that one time she turned Medusa into a Gorgon, but everybody makes mistakes. But the game plays on this by removing the cold wisdom and judgment of Athena, leaving her as a naive child who will believe whatever she's told.
And those wings you're wearing, they're a safety hazard.
Ares, god of bloody war, violence, and legendarily brutal defender of armies, struts through Greek myth as a pride-filled and overconfident braggart crowing about his own prowess, which is why Typhon turned him into a rooster in-game. But worse than that, he's now a desperate, humbled coward who is afraid he'll never get back to his lady love Aphrodite.
Just get it over with. Fillet me, it'll numb my pain.
Is also a reference to the story where Ares wooed Aphrodite and had a prolonged affair with the already married goddess. Needing to keep their nightly activities secret, Ares posted his squire at the door of the house they would run off to watch for the coming of Helios each morning. But one day the squire fell asleep, and Aphrodite's husband, Hephaestus, caught a wind of them. So he laid a trap and then summoned all the gods to point and laugh at him as they were caught in flagrante delicto, which pisses Ares off so much he turned his squire into a rooster. So it's deliciously ironic here that Ares is a rooster, and it's left him as one of the sorriest sad sacks of a god you could ever encounter. And that is until you meet Hephaestus, god of fire, metalwork, forges, smithing, and generally making really cool metal things for a wife that does not love him. He would work night and day in his forge to try and create beautiful things to win back Aphrodite's affection. All the while, Ares would use that time to get busy with his wife. The Greeks felt there was a lesson in there somewhere. Thankfully, Hephaestus found a way to channel his depression and self-hatred into creative endeavors and made some truly badass stuff, like the metal automaton eagle that Zeus calls to peck out Prometheus' liver every day. It's one of these automaton robots that Typhon has turned Hephaestus into by taking away his depression. But instead of magic Zoloft, it's just left him empty inside, so that now Hephaestus is a robot that just sits around and paints and sculpts all day, but isn't particularly good at it because he doesn't have any emotion to drive him. Like all the gods in-game, Typhon's curse could almost be considered an improvement, unburdened from their biggest flaws so that they seem like better people who have learned from their experiences, but they're also shadows of their former selves.
Can you believe you actually had to convince me to return to this body?
You can solve all of this by picking up Immortals Fenyx Rising through the link in the description below, as it's now out on every major platform. And if you don't have the hardware to run it, no worries, as you can stream it through Google Stadia, where it is also now available. Begin your journey in the clashing rocks of the coast, then explore Aphrodite's Valley of Eternal Spring, across the forge lands of Hephaestus, to Athena's forested grove of Cleos and the war's den of Ares, to the tippy top of the King's Peak of Zeus and the depths of the gates of Tartarus. There is a big world of adventure waiting on you that is crammed full of mystery and myth at every corner. So I want to say a big thank you to Ubisoft for sponsoring this video, for allowing me to explore the island's mythology with you, and to thank you for watching it. Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got a couple thousand more Greek heroes, monsters, and myths to discover. Thanks for watching.